What to talk about? I don't know what to talk.
Well, I was about to take a deep breath and start, and I thought, oh, I better get the episode number first. Make sure. I always got to look and make sure because I know that's an easy thing to screw up for me anyway.
Yeah, I never quite remember myself. I used to do that on Mr. Hopper's Digest.
Oh, and when there's three shows and the numbers are so
Oh yeah,
wildly different. All right,
yeah.
here we go. Linux OTC, welcome to episode 65. I'm Bill.
I'm Eric, and that's it.
That's it. That's all you get.
All you get,
The two of
and you're
us.
gonna like it. Episode 65.
Can you believe it?
It's a good round number, right?
It's not bad. It's better than
Yeah,
what a lot of people probably would have predicted by this point.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think podcasting is all about enjoying doing it, right?
It is.
You see shows that struggle, and I don't know. I mean, I guess there's plenty of people who are trying to do this to make money. And man, podcasting is such a saturated market now, right? I mean,
It is.
I'm not sure.
And when you're a niche of a niche of a niche, you're you're fighting,
Potential audience. Yeah.
that's a lot of
Like,
carp fighting over that one piece of bread, that's
yeah, yeah.
that's kind of tough. I kind of thought about that when in the beginning, when I thought, man, it'd be kind of nice to make some money doing this, but that when you get your head wrapped around that, it changes the way you approach the whole thing, and it kind of,
Yep.
I think it takes from the quality of it, in my opinion. So it's something you got to be careful of.
Well, you start questioning yourself and like, okay, I'm doing this for profit now, and and even if it's not about making a lot of money, you sort of start thinking about, well, okay, if what kind of content is going to be attractive to more listeners, and try to get more revenue from ads and stuff, and like, am I going to start saying or doing things that I might not have otherwise if I didn't have that motivation? Does it change the fundamental sort of structure of what you're doing? And I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to not have it influence what you're doing,
No,
I
it's
guess.
impossible, or at least I
But
imagine it would be,
yeah,
because I
I've been on one podcast that was for profit, and we did ad reads and stuff like that, and it was, I mean, it was fine. I don't think it changed too much, but there was definitely like a recognition that that was another part of it, another dimension to it. And I think the reason that we're at 65 and that this is likely to go to 650, if we're still around to do it, is that we just enjoy doing it,
we
right? And
do, and it doesn't
I
depend
think
on
those are the
anything.
ones.
The only thing it depends on is the people having the time to be able to show up, and beyond
Yeah,
that, it's really not that big of a deal, And people people that use Linux, they've always got an opinion. I've noticed. I've noticed that's a simple thing to come up with. Honestly, uh,
well, it's one of those things where before we start, I'm like, I don't really have anything to talk about. And somehow at the end of it, I'm like trying to get out the rest of what I was thinking of because it just comes to us. And I think that just goes to the personalities, and we just enjoy spending time and can talk to each other about just about anything.
yeah,
So we certainly almost sometimes talk about Linux,
it
which
does.
is, I
You
guess
have to.
technically the
Somebody
point.
has to notice. Sometimes people have to notice. Okay, wait a minute. This is getting a little bit off course here. We've got to steer the ship back on course and get it back on.
Yeah,
Because you have so many. Oh, I don't know. You have so many opinions about so many different things, and here you've got this microphone, and this is the first time you've had an opportunity to just regurgitate all of the stuff that you've been bottling up all week, and
yeah.
it is
Well,
a
and particularly because you have an audience of people, even if it's just literally the other people on the podcast who are willing to listen to you go
yes,
on
yeah,
about things that no one else in your life has any interest in whatsoever.
right.
They may feign interest, but they're not really interested. They might be polite at best.
They'll
But
put up with it for a little while, and then you'll
well,
start.
until they have a problem, right? And then
Yeah.
it's funny because every time I spend time with anyone in my family, and no one else has any interest in technology really, other than just using it, obviously. But it never fails that, oh, I wanted to ask you about, and then they'll hand me their phone or something, and it's not. I don't know anything about iPhones, but I guess you understand enough to be able to help them with usually a pretty simple problem. But
Right.
and that's it's like they make a list of things they want to ask you about.
Oh, I
And
need to write that
yeah, I
down. The next
guess,
time I see Eric, I got to ask him.
yeah,
So,
and I mean, on one hand, it does make me feel good to have that sort of usefulness. It's That's probably the wrong way to say it. I mean,
no, I know.
having an expertise and having it be something that you would think that with the way technology has sort of infiltrated every corner of our lives at this point, whether you choose to or not, right? I mean, it is just a fact of modern life, that people would take more of an interest, at least a cursory one, to sort of understand better around them, what's happening. But it seems like if anything, we're trying to abstract what technology is away from that and make it even less or even more opaque and less obvious, like
And
what's happening.
I think even the normal people are starting to notice that, because one of the biggest questions I get from normal people when it comes to the phones is, why are these apps asking for these permissions? Why does a music player need permission to see my call logs or access my
Yeah,
contacts list and things like that? And I don't always have a good answer for them, other than, well, there's a good possibility that because it's a free app, it's trying to gather as much uh, information on its users as it can, so that it can sell that information, in a
yeah,
is legally getting, skating the edge of what's legal, just enough to where you can get away with it and still be able to gather as much information as it needs. So I try to steer people towards the more open source options that are out there, but not, sometimes those are not even, sometimes those don't even really, it's not real clear why they need the permissions
yeah.
that they need, to, or say they need, I should say, to operate, because yeah, they all want permissions. It doesn't seem like it makes any sense for what they need to do,
I give I give Android in particular. So I'm not an iPhone user. I haven't used an iPhone in a very long time, so I have no basis of knowledge to speak from there. But at least on the Android side, the fact that they do make the permissions and what something is trying to use much more visible in terms of like the granularity and the popping up and asking you at least the first time. And I tend to do this time only. A lot of times, if something is asking me, like it needs my location or it needs access to my microphone, or those are sort of the more like often requested permissions. And you have that choice. And it's just like with location, you can say, well, it can either be pinpoint accuracy or sort of general area. And you can, so I give them some amount of credit for at least giving the controls to people. Now, whether or not they use them, whether or not they go in and look to see, like, if this is an app that I don't necessarily trust, I'll actually go and look and see what the default permission set is. And but it feels a little more like there's a little more power in my hands now than there had been in the past, where it was just sort of like, well, if you want this thing to work, or if you install it, it just gets all of these permissions whether you like it or not. But it is sort of wild if you use something like a Pi hole or some sort of a mechanism that filters traffic, to see how many times an app will ping back
Oh
to a
god.
central server, or what it's looking for. Like, okay, why has my Roku made 15,000 requests today to the server? Like, what the hell is it doing?
It is so
And the
bad.
amount of chatter is wild.
It is so bad that I run Pi-hole on my network, but I don't hook every, well, I don't hook the router to it, and I don't hook every device in the house to it because I would be constantly dealing with the wife and her silly little games that she plays on her phone
Yep.
all day, and then some of the apps on the Nvidia Shield. Um, Two of the biggest perpetrators that I'm aware of, and of course it's been years, but the CW, because the wife used to watch all those Supergirl and Arrow shows and all that, and she'd use that CW app. Man, that thing was calling home all the time, and Pi-hole was blocking it, and it wouldn't work. So I
Mm.
had to allow list that. I mean, and then her games, so I would sit there. You would literally sit there all day long and allow list domains because
Yeah. Yep.
these games, and she's got hundreds of these games. So I thought, okay, I give up. I'll have Pi-hole running, but I'm gonna just the machines I'm running or the machines that I need to know are using it, and beyond that, just use Cloudflare or something that's
I figured, and I figured so. Not sorry about that, but
yeah,
the ones that I assume are the greatest risk are the IoT type things that are not being updated on with any regularity, if
yeah.
ever. So I have actually a group in my router for filtering that basically is IoT, and anything that fits that description goes in there, and it has the most like locked down, access in terms of like what it can do and what it can get to, and that kind of stuff. The filtering that happens. But I agree with you. I ran a pie hole, tried to put my family on it, and yeah, my wife. I mean, it wasn't even games. Maybe that was a small vector that was annoying her, but a lot of times it was the shopping she did. So she would go to a lot of these shopping websites, and they pepper you with emails. They
Oh
send you
yeah.
5 emails a day to, oh, here's a sale or here's this or that, and so much of it is tracking. Just blatant marketing. Slop. And my wife would try to open one of their emails, and it would trigger one of the filters, and I can't get to this, shopping site, or I can't get to this. So I agree with you. I went through the same pain and actually created two separate profiles, and all of my machines were on one. And then, I had hers on a much less restrictive set where it was basically just malware,
Yeah.
um, you know, the worst of the worst type stuff. But yeah, but it also amazes me that there are people left who don't use ad blocking when they're browsing the web. Like when I go up to someone's computer to help them, or if I look at someone's screenshots and I'm just like, wow, that's right. I forgot. There's a lot of freaking ads on these web pages.
It almost reminds you of the days when you'd go to look at somebody's computer that they say they're having a problem with it. You'd open up Internet Explorer and there'd be like these toolbars taking up half
I
the
knew what you were
screen.
going to say.
you
I
knew
knew it was
you
Ask
knew that was
Jeeves and
coming.
all those. Yeah. Oh,
And
that was, it never failed. And I'm like, don't you, is that bothering you? And they're like, what is bothering me? And it's like,
yeah, oh, they ain't got a clue.
literally got the Yahoo toolbar, the MSN toolbar, the, Ask Jeeves, and like,
Every one of
it's,
them. That silly. That
yeah,
silly. What Avast? Was it Avast or another
yeah,
one? It
that
was.
was one.
Yeah, and it was anti-malware that behaved like malware. If you,
Well, they all do.
yeah,
So my in-laws do McAfee. They've just been sold that for year after year, and I'm just like, you don't need it. And it comes up every year. It's like, should I renew this? It never fails. I'm going to get that question. I'm like, no, you haven't had it for years. It's not worth putting on your computer because all it's going to do is slow it down and make it worse, and it doesn't really help. I mean, yes, in the most blatant cases, it might help you, but otherwise, it's just taking up resources it doesn't need to. Plus, it's expensive, and so, yeah,
yeah.
and I'm like, Windows does a pretty good job with the stuff that's built in. It's not infallible, but you know,
I mean, what it's not doing anything that Windows Defender wouldn't do. It's just doing it a little flashier. It's giving you a little bit more interface into what's happening. It's maybe
yeah,
giving you some more graphical insight. I don't know, something like that. But what we really need is something sitting in the background. There's been no need since Windows 7, as far as I'm concerned. When it wasn't called Defender back then. What was it called? Internet or Microsoft Security Essentials or something. And
Yeah,
then
something
that
like that. I think you're right.
they had Defender, but that was more of an anti-adware thing. And then they kind
Yeah.
of,
Yep.
for 8, they kind of rolled it all together. And ever since then, it's not been necessary to spend money because it's all the same.
Completely agree.
Yeah, it's been all the same virus definitions ever since then. But it's kind of hard to convince people because they got it stuck in their mind. If I'm not spending money on it, then it must not be worth anything. And
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to bring people out of that way of thinking, honestly. And I mean that's a problem with Linux too. I get these people. I probably got 8, 10 people using Linux on a computer right now, just regular people. They're not gamers. They're just people that want to shop online or pay their bills or whatever. And they got an old computer and it ain't working too good. Well, hey, watch this. Put Mint on there and it works great. And the thing they can't rise above is the lack of cost. Here I have access to all this software and
Yeah.
it's not costing a thing, and nobody's really asking for any money. They're not in my face wanting money all day long like some of these other things are. So it's kind of hard to. And I wonder if that's a side effect of capitalism or um, just a way that we've.
That's also I think it's a side effect of the people that specifically. So I would say that there are a lot of people who expect to only ever pay nothing for things because we've been conditioned with this sort of, free, everything's free, your
Yeah.
email's free, um, and so when you actually ask people to put money behind something they value, it's a difficult choice. Now I know there's a very specific culture around free and open source software and Linux people, and that where they have a fundamental problem with paying for anything. Not universally, but there definitely is pushback in many cases. Why is this costing money? And usually it's because it's nothing, is free. Basically, if I'm spending time building a piece of software, even if I'm distributing it on a shared platform or something, GitHub or whatever, it still costs me time and energy to develop it, whatever, all the same arguments. But I think that's one camp definitely. And then, yeah, the other side of it, which is just used to the Windows side where it's like, you're used to paying for something on a computer. And I agree with you. I've had that same pushback where it's like, well, how can Linux be free? What do you mean it's free? Like someone has to be making money from it. And it's like, yeah, they do, but they're not making it directly from the consumer. It's more like on the business side of things or support side. So if you had a problem and you went to them and asked for help, they might want you to pay for that help, or there might be some sort of subscription for support. But it's not like they're giving you the product for free, if you want to put it that way, and then the service they sell is how they could make money if they chose to do that. And that sometimes helps people understand, but there's not a great analog for free and open source in the like physical world. It's an unusual thing for it to be so altruistic, just like I'm going to build a thing and just put it out there and the world can take it and do whatever they want with it. That's knowledge and physical products and like that's not usually the way things work, because there's always some sort of gatekeeper or some funnel of
It's almost
you
like you
have to
have to
go
build
through
this.
that.
You have to build this concept of an alternative world in people's heads. Where like, okay, imagine a world where people are gaining value from sharing ideas and the things that they're good at with each other. And then somebody comes along and says, "Well, that's just communism. I ain't gonna do none of that right there." So, but but it is. It's a world where we come together and we've all got a certain skill. This is my overly romanticized notion of how this works. Uh, we've all got a certain skill, or we all have something that we are interested in, and so we work on and we bring it together. And here is this thing. Here is this entire universe of tools and technology that we can use to do the things that we want to do without paying some giant corporation a huge amount of money. And that's it. Almost feels to me like you have to paint that picture first before you say, okay, now here's this operating system. It's an alternative thing for your computer, and you'll never have to pay a single dime to use any of this stuff. And people, some people, some people are easier to convince than others.
Yeah.
You gotta get past that
I,
idea, that, well, if it don't cost nothing, it must not be worth nothing.
but I think that's where that comes into the personal relationship. Like if they know you and they know that maybe your background's in technology or just that you are a hobbyist or whatever, that you have an understanding of something,
Yeah.
and you are vouching for something like that. In a lot of cases, that's enough for a lot of people, especially if it's family, a friend, that kind of thing. Random stranger, maybe not as much, but the idea that you can demonstrate or show them like, look, I've used it this way myself for a very long time, and I do all the same things that you would normally do. The rub is still just proprietary software. There's certain pieces of software that are, institutionalized basically whenever you're trying to do a certain thing.
Yeah.
But even that, I feel like it's a flimsy excuse, or becoming more and more flimsy as time goes on, because the number of those things seems to get smaller, and the major shift was obviously web based, and that made running an alternate operating system like Linux much less painful than it had been previously, when everything was an app. Everything you did was a program that was on your machine, and your machine had to support that software, and it had to run, and between updates and all the rest of it, it was much more precarious. Whereas everything being web based is just relying on you having a specific browser, and those same browsers are available on everything basically, and so that levels the playing field for most things. But yeah, and those companies, I don't think it would be technically very difficult to build that software to run, it's to be platform agnostic, but there's just no real incentive for them to do that, and I get that. I used to feel a certain amount of like hostility towards those companies because of it, but I'm much more realistic now, and the audience for those products, whether or not people will agree with me on this, it's very small. I mean, you're talking the grand scheme of things, a company like Adobe, because that's usually one of the standouts, right, is because of their
Oh
Creative
yeah.
Suite stuff. But if they've got 1 billion customers, let's say, and I think that's not that hard to believe if it's true, or at least approaching it, what's the percentage on that aren't on Windows? Because even Mac is a fraction. So it's just doesn't make any sense for them if it was a difficult thing. And we know the good developers are very expensive. And I don't know, maybe, excuse me, maybe this is somewhere where artificial intelligence um, makes it such that, companies have more flexibility, more, capacity to take on the less, I guess, mainstream platforms, and to say like, well, we can. This is like, I'll equate it back almost to like games that run on Proton. At a certain point, like, why do you even build a game for Linux anymore if it runs really well on Proton? And I get native support is a thing, and like, of course, having it run natively technically is always going to be a better option, but
You
even
say
with
that,
Proton and
but
running through.
I put Steam on this machine, and one of the games in my library is the old version of uh, Portal, which is a Valve game,
Yep.
and it's got a Linux native version. Does not work. You have to go into the settings and tell it to use the Proton version, and then all of a sudden it works. So it feels almost like I don't want to use the word abandonment, but there almost feels like this idea that you're almost better off doing development for the Proton layer than you are going one platform or the other, or certainly towards the Linux side, because anybody that's gaming on Linux is doing it on Proton these days. Anybody that's serious about gaming on Linux is doing
Right.
it with Proton.
If a developer is worried about supporting all the different distributions or supporting, you know, that it's messy, it's not as straightforward as like say Windows would be, then yeah, if you just shoot for something like Proton and you just say, okay, here's this layer or wine or whatever the specifics would be, like if it works on that, chances are it's going to work on every system that supports it. So you don't have to go into too much of a quagmire or the weeds or whatever to like support a whole huge swath of computers out there. You basically just shoot for Proton or whatever the equivalent is, and there you go. And if you certify on that, or you just as you build or release updates or whatever, you make sure they're running properly. Then you just don't even have to worry about it. There's no argument in there about whether build something specifically, and do we have the resources, or just make sure it runs on Proton. So
Yeah.
if there was an equivalent to that for, like, if Steam were to distribute, and I know they do distribute software, but if there was a way to extend that to something like the traditional pieces of software that still don't run natively on Linux but could run through a layer like that. I
Well,
mean,
that's
I
interesting.
know.
Is there any technical reason why a layer of abstraction like Proton, as uh, robust as it is there any technical reason why that wouldn't work for productivity software?
I
Yeah.
have to imagine there's still something that it's doing that, there is enough of a dependence on the core technologies of Linux, or I'm sorry, of Windows, that it just can't simply run on an emulation layer.
Okay.
I mean, we know it works well in a virtual machine because obviously it's just another copy of Windows. So that's always been one of those like half measures where you say, okay, you can still run Windows programs. You just have to run them in a Windows environment on Linux or on something or even Mac. I mean, there's plenty of people who run virtualization on Mac so they can run Windows apps. So, but yeah, the specifics of it, I honestly don't really know off the top of my head. But there have got to be good enough reasons, and there are certain versions of Microsoft Office or Adobe Acrobat or whatever the specific application is that will run through Wine. They tend to be older ones that are intended to be installed, you know, but it. I think it's the type of thing where there's enough change in the apps themselves between releases, or the assumption that if it's working on Windows, then that's but there's going to be certain rough edges, or I don't know. I honestly don't know what it is specifically that makes something run gold on Wine versus not run at all or be garbage. So
It's just always felt to
yeah,
me like, I mean, for many years it's always felt to me like the silver bullet would be for a technology to be a good halfway house, which yeah, we've got Wine, yeah, we've got Crossover and QEMU, QUEMU, and things like that, and these things do a good job. But if it got to the point, and like you said, if you put AI on the job, maybe we could come up with something better or whatnot. But it always seemed to me like what we need to strive towards is where we can put together an API layer that's got all of the boxes checked, to where developers do not need to worry about the operating system that they are supporting. They just need to worry about making this software, write it in this whatever language they choose, and then let the API layer in between work out, what, okay, this thing needs to be it needs to be translated to work with Vulkan, or this thing needs to work with Linux, on this level or whatnot, and it's always seemed to me like that would be the more logical way of doing it, but it must be a Herculean task to make something like that happen, because it feels
Yeah.
like wine would be maybe wine's the answer, but I don't know. They've been around a very long time, and it's still. I mean, they've made. Oh man, it's almost amazing to me the stuff that wine can do that it couldn't do just 10, 15 years ago. But we're still not we're not on parity yet. Which it
Yeah.
almost feels like either I don't know at this point if it's a technological challenge or if it's a matter of they've just absolutely not allowed it to happen because they don't want these things to work on Linux or what it is. But it's always felt like that layer in between. If you nailed that down, then it wouldn't matter who you were supporting with your software. It would just work no matter where you ran it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just dreaming.
Yeah. Well, and so Wine is supported or developed by Codeweavers, who sells Crossover Office. And I've often looked at it and thought, what is it that people are using it for? Because the sales pitch, whenever I'm looking at the website, it says, you're running Linux, you don't want the despair of running a Windows OS on your machine. You don't want to sell your soul for a Windows license, da 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 da. So obviously, there's a lot of like, we don't like Microsoft there, but thousands of Windows games and programs run on your favorite Linux distro. And I guess that means you go to the database and you see what runs and what doesn't. But I guess when I hear someone saying like, "Oh yeah, I use Crossover Office," I should be asking the question why. Like, what is it that you're actually using it to run? And I think maybe that comes down to there's a lot of smaller bits of softwares, less notable or widespread, widely used pieces of software. Like I always default to Adobe or Microsoft Office because I think those are the two most commonly cited ones.
Yeah.
But maybe there are just literally thousands of programs that people are using and they use something like Crossover Office and it actually lets them run them properly. I would think after using Linux for almost 30 years now that I would know the answer to that question, um, but I think that comes down to making a choice and deciding that if I can't run it on Linux, if it's important enough, then maybe just running a virtual machine every so often, just firing it up because I need to do this one thing and then doing it and turning it off and being done with it. Not needing to like have my system be continuously supporting running,
Yeah.
Windows-based software. Um, because I guess if it wasn't for a company, it wasn't for a job, like it's something I was required to do. What my philosophy's just been is like, well, just find something else. Just find another alternative or an option that is. In many cases, at least it used to be. It was like it would be almost as good, right? You'd have to just sort of settle for something that was. I mean, it gets the job done. It's not as pretty, maybe, or it's not as full featured, or, you can't do that one thing because it'll crash, or, there's just, you have to sort of accept that it's the level of development that it is. But I think that's changed a lot over the years. Like the software that I use on Linux now, it's hard for me if I do happen to go to Windows or I go to Mac or something to find the analog on that platform. At least it doesn't cost some ridiculous amount of money, right? Like, so all of the things I run on a Linux system, I kind of take for granted now because, like, I look through all of the programs I have installed, and most of them are Linux only. It's not something that's cross-platform, and I would be I would miss most of this stuff. So the irony is, like, I'm not a Windows user coming to Linux that's like going to miss some weird Windows software or something that runs only on Windows. Like, I would be the exact opposite. If I went to Windows, I'd be completely completely lost because, like, where's all of my cherished software that I've come to run? I mean, I think it's worse. Switching cost to Windows would be 10 times worse and more painful than it is the other direction. But then that's me. and I recognize that I do things, probably a little differently. But
No, I mean, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because I do have one machine that is on Windows, but I'm running a lot of the same software. And just the workflow for updating that software instead of like having it all come down with your software manager, and then you run your updates like anybody
oh
that,
yeah,
that uses Mint or,
well, there's that. What is it? Is it Wingit or something?
yeah,
I
you've
think
got
that's
that.
supposed to. Yeah,
But
and it's very slow. I'm not sure what it's. I guess it's because it has to do the entire like install routine for each. Like that's the beauty of the package manager, right? It's handling everything. It looks in totality. Okay, there's 100 packages I need to
yeah.
update. Some of them are binary packages that I need to just dump into a folder, and some of them might be something I need to compile, while I'm doing it. But like I'm handling this as an entire sort of run, batch or something, versus Windows and even something like Winget. It just seems like, okay, I've got an update for this program. I have to run through that whole update routine, and then I move on to the next one. Okay, and then and if you've got 20 of them, it feels like it takes hours to do. And I'm not running like a potato machine. I mean, it's not like it's starved for resources, or you know what I mean. It's just
Yeah.
that's how long it takes to in ups. I mean, it's like a Windows update. Why the hell does it take 2 hours to install something? So I don't
And
know.
nobody will ever know. Nobody will ever have a good answer
Yeah,
to that question.
yeah.
But in most cases,
I feel like
it's like you run the program, and then when you open that program, that's when it goes and looks and sees, okay, I've got an update. So it interrupts
oh
you,
yeah,
and
yeah.
in the middle of using this program, and in many cases, you've got to download the update, and then you've got to restart the program to do the thing you wanted to do. So there's no, yeah,
But
you've
that's a
got
very that's like a philosophical difference, isn't it?
yeah.
Where there's like this, it's almost like a level of entitlement that Windows developers and I mean, maybe it's as much Mac as Windows, but definitely Windows, where, yeah, you're right. Like, okay, I open my browser, I open this piece of software, and I'm trying to just get something done. Oh, wait a minute. You've got all these updates, or you've got all this stuff to do, and it's like there's this like friction between me just getting something done. Whereas, yeah, on the Linux side of things, like that just doesn't exist. I mean, yeah, maybe certain pieces of software will tell you there's an update, but even that's kind of rare, you know. And maybe that's just expectation. Like we don't want stuff doing that. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it philosophically, but it is a huge. You just saying that made me think about every time I would open something, and it was just like, hey, there's an update, and like, I don't care. I'm
Yeah, and
busy.
well, I think it's because we've gotten used to the whole idea of our updates being managed and all one-stop shop updating. We don't
Yep.
really delineate our application updates from our operating system updates or even our firmware updates. Nowadays it's all put in the same interface and it's all brought down together. And then once you're done with that, because it puts it in the tray, doesn't it? Most of these distributions, it puts it in
Mm-hmm.
the tray. That
Mm-hmm.
way, when you're ready to run the updates, you can do the whole thing at one time. And then if you got kernel or driver updates, you can restart the machine, and it'll let you know to do that. And so that we can think of updates as a thing separate from everything else we do, rather than opening the application that we want to run and then, oh well, wait, now I got to update it before I can run it.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah, I don't know if that's an
Well,
entitlement that we've come up with, or if it's just because it's been, architecturally it's been easier to handle updates that way for Linux than to
I think
have,
it's just a way that you get used to it, right? I mean, and,
yeah,
and I've tried to explain to people about why I think it's easier to use Linux as an end user, as just a general desktop user, like not a professional, not someone who's just sitting down in front of a computer. And that's one of the big ones is everything's sort of, not everything, but in many cases it's at least in a central location on your machine through an updater. It may be coming from different places. You might have flat packs and system packages and different things, but in many cases that's sort of consolidated into a single package, a single piece of software,
yeah,
that's doing the updates. If you're even using graphical software, like I almost never use a package manager. I use a command line most times, just because that's just how I have a alias called sysup that just goes through and it pulls down all the apt stuff, and then it'll do the flat packs, and so it just kind of does a chain of
Wow.
update commands.
I've got a
And I
similar
just
thing
like
for
to run it.
Arch called Full Up, but what it does is
Okay,
I've really made this script robust because it'll check and make sure you've got the necessary tools installed, and if it doesn't, it'll install them and update your mirror list, update your packages on the normal side, and then go and update your AUR packages and your develop packages, and then it moves on to Flatpak and updates those, and then it cleans the database and all that stuff, you know. So I've
nice.
got a similar thing. Um, Although I let Mint on this machine, I let the default tools do the job.
Yep. Yep,
And
Mint is the only the only update manager, and even the Software Center. Those are those. I don't know what it. I mean, obviously, I think they just put a lot of effort into
yeah,
it, and that's why it is as good as it is. But yeah, the update manager is fantastic, especially if you turn off the don't show the icon when there's no updates in the tray, so it just
yes,
literally gets out of
yes,
your way.
yes,
So that's nice, and the fact that it also then incorporates all of your flat packs and stuff as well. And then yeah, the software manager is fast. You open it, it's got a nice layout. You can search quickly, like all the things that most of them generally aren't. And so yeah, Mint unsurprisingly does an excellent job of focusing on the end user experience when dealing with software, and I think that's kind of magical for some people to experience that the first time they open up something like the Mint Software Center, and all this software is available. Like I can literally just click install. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's it.
yeah. It's funny you bring that up because I remember when that whole concept of an app center on the phones, you know, that became a thing, you know, years and years. It's got oh god, it's been a lot of years now, but when people first started seeing this concept of a one-stop shop where they could go get their software rather than, you know, the old like Windows XP days where you had to go surfing the internet to find the thing you want and then download it and install it. And yeah, okay, that sucks. Let's go ahead and get rid of that and move, you know, go searching for something else. And then here comes this, you know, and here we are Linux users like, oh yeah, we've been doing that since the 90s, you know, that's nothing new, you know. Although
Yep.
it has, you know, progressively gotten better, um, because it, you know, there's always been little paper cut problems with it over the years, but you know, I think it's gotten to the point, especially, you know, obviously we would say Mint has it down because we're on Mintcast, but um, I think their software center incorporates things together in a more fluid way. Um,
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah. And they just go.
no. I was just going to say one more thing. I've got mixed feelings about how they handle the snaps. You know, I think some time has gone by, and they could probably, on one
Yeah.
hand, I think they could get rid of that thing that they've got locking the where you've got to, you know, execute a command to get rid of that file that locks the snaps out. But
Yeah.
on the same token, we don't know if Canonical is going to decide some other very important piece of software is going to become a snap overnight, you know, and if you undo what the Mint developers have done and then Canonical decides that they don't want, I don't know. I don't know. They don't want some other piece of software to be in the repository anymore for the exact same reasons. You know, they turn that into a snap, and now you've got snap on a system that you didn't want snap on. You know, I can kind
Yep.
of see that, you know. But other than that, you know, I've really had no problems with the way they were doing. Anyways, what was you going to say?
Oh no, I was going to say, I mean, that's up, obviously it's their purview, and this is the strength of a distribution, I think, still, is that they can be opinionated. And yes, of course, they're riding the coattails of Ubuntu. They use a lot of their packages, and but everybody does. I mean, that's sort of Canonical's greatest contribution to the world, I think, is just giving people access to their repositories and letting it be a
Yeah.
base for so many other distributions. That kind of like that is mind blowing when you try to explain to someone like, okay, there is this company who does all this work in putting out software packages and putting things together for these releases, and and then they just let everybody have it. It's like, what?
And then when you put Mint on a machine for somebody, you're explaining this concept of, well, you're actually using something that's three layers down in terms of
Yeah.
the stream of how this technology has made itself onto your machine. It started with Debian and down to Ubuntu, and then with things like Mint. And people's minds just get blown with that. But it's
Yep.
there's
And it
there's
all
a
works.
beauty in
And
that, and
that's the
it
part that I
works.
think,
Yeah,
yeah, that's the part that I think blows a lot of people's mind, is that how could that possibly be sustainable? And it is. I mean, it's been persisting for a long time, and to the point where Mint is even forward-looking enough to your point about what if Ubuntu does something with a snap. So when they did that with Firefox, they packaged Firefox as a deb file, right? So that they could run it natively and not have it be a snap. So they stepped in and were able to do that themselves, and then even have a Debian edition where they've taken the underlying structure and packages and everything and based it on Debian instead of Ubuntu, in case Canonical were to do something wild and make it so that, I don't know, that whatever Mint has done isn't going to work on Ubuntu anymore. Then they have a Debian edition, and it's almost identical. There's a couple things that are a little different, but by and large, it's still Mint, and it still does all the Mint things. So I think, we might miss some of the things that are on the Ubuntu side of it, but Debian's changed a lot. It's not as sort of cut and dried black and white as it used to be. Like, there's a lot of sort of support for things, non-free software, binary blobs, like stuff that wasn't available before, and made it more challenging.
that's interesting too, because
And
I always felt like I think Debian was kind of, for a while there, going out of their way to make it a little bit more difficult to. I mean, for people that knew how to get it and get it running, yeah, fine, it
yeah,
was fine.
right.
But it seemed unnecessary and maybe a little hypocritical the way it was set up. That
It was more philosophical than practical. I mean,
yeah,
that was really what it came down to.
because it's not. I mean, there are distributions out there that their entire shtick is to be completely libre, without
Yes.
a single line of proprietary code, whatsoever, and that's great. I love that there is that portion of the market out there, and they're filling that need. I just never thought Debian needed to be nearly that black and white with it. Debian needs to work for us.
I think too, though, if we think about the times we live in currently, where Linux, at least on the server side, like Linux is not a joke, right? I mean, Linux is serious
No,
business. We're talking a substantial amount of the world's economy running on servers that run Linux as the base for everything we do, right? Technologically wise, and so like it's an important piece of software. It's an important bit of technology. So like it has enough sort of clout now and enough sort of importance that it's not as precarious as it used to be, where the ideals of free software were under attack by the likes of Microsoft and others, where they were trying to make it basically illegal or impossible to run something like Linux, in lieu of trying to sell more Windows stuff. I mean, Microsoft really went hard at Linux for a long time, and so I give them credit. That's where the Libra side of it was really sort of militant, like, we cannot, entangle ourselves in, proprietary software because it opens us up to all of this potential for, liability and, legality, and we just can't do it. Like, this is how we can be who we are and what we want to achieve, but it can only be at the cost of making it more challenging for random people. And that allowed then, Ubuntu grew off of Debian because Ubuntu made it easier to use a desktop system. It made it easier to use hardware that was either otherwise very difficult to use, and made a computer that much harder to run on Linux. And Ubuntu, you know, grew off of that, right? Standing on the shoulders of giants or whatever. So, and then Mint did the same thing with Ubuntu. Whenever codecs and using media and different things, like Mint made it a lot easier to just use like it was a normal sort of Windows system or something. So, and that's sort of been the the path we've taken, and it's been hugely successful. I mean, the if I would show myself 20 years ago a modern version of Linux, it would be like, wow, that is amazing. Like how easy it is. And just like installing takes 5 minutes. It's like incredible, like how easy and straightforward everything is. And all of the mirrors work and the packages all work. And like everything is just so clean and functional. And like, it's really impressive how much Linux has grown and how polished it is now compared to what it used to be. So,
You mean you can install it and the Wi-Fi just works? Are you kidding me?
I mean, almost everything works. It's
Yeah.
actually surprising to me when something doesn't, and you're just like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, you still
I remember
you, you
well,
got
every
those
time you
weird
buy
esoteric
something,
edge cases with Wi-Fi and things like that. For the most part, yeah, you've got a reasonable
yeah,
expectation. Your video card's going to work. Your Wi-Fi card's going to work. All of your peripherals.
yep,
Printing was another thing that used to be a little bit irritating back in the day, and that's I.
yep,
Of course, I don't do as much printing as I used to do back then, but you've got more of an expectation than you once did. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that's just the truth of like every. It was like a long process, obviously, but everywhere there was that roadblock or that friction, people came in and made it better, which is just a testament to people's willingness to. And you were talking about society earlier in a larger sense of like trying to understand people's usefulness within that, and like the idea that you're providing value and then you'd expect to get a return for that. And I think to a degree that some of that would come down to like a village type society where it's a smaller group of people where you're all sort of relying on each other to survive. Like I think that sort of builds in that the need to be cooperative and the need to see value in what others do, and versus like commoditization of things where it's like, as a like we can just move manufacturing to somewhere where it's cheaper, or I don't know, we devalue things in a way that isn't normal, isn't like really natural if we were trying to go back to where we started in terms of like how can you how do you survive as a group of people, like what is society. And yeah, I don't know where the hell I was going with that. I had that thought 10 minutes ago and I think I lost the plot on it, but anyway, yeah, I'm very thankful for all the work that other people have done to allow me to the luxury of sitting down in front of a computer and not being beholden to Microsoft or Apple or some other corporation who's going to decide in an update to change the way I use my system in a way that I can't then undo or change back or make the decision myself. And that's an amazing accomplishment that it shouldn't be about money, right? I mean, and unfortunately everything sort of boils down to capitalism, makes everything about money, but this is so much bigger than that and so much more impressive. Um, and yeah, the countless man hours and I mean, you can't even really quantify, right? The amount of like time and energy that went into where we are today, you know?
Capitalism would say that we're being naive to try to imagine that it's not about money. That because that people that are steeped in capitalism probably, I imagine they believe that everything we do is in some way to profit ourselves, to gather unto ourselves. Why do we do anything? Like psychodynamic theory, where everything we do on a psychological level is to so that we can mate with females. I guess we men, you know, on that same level, everything we do outside of that is to make profit. Because what good is it to do anything if we're not profiting from it? Because that's what buys the groceries, that's what pays for the rent, whatnot.
I guess.
What do we say to those people?
Yeah.
I don't. I try not to say much to those people.
That's an argument you can't win, right? Because of
No.
course there is that biological imperative underneath of everything. Like that's what makes our species survive. Like, there's that. And even there, I mean, you kind of question, like, we do things that are very counter to our survival on a day-to-day basis. Like we make terrible decisions about how, our environment should be, or even reproductive stuff. Like if we're supposed to just be, every impulse is towards mating, then why is the population, plummeting? Why are we not actually having offspring? You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of hard to argue that every motive we have is for self enrichment, self preservation, because I don't think humans as a species could survive that way. I think we are built to be open, to share, to be social, to have empathy towards others, to, help other people around us, because that's how we then receive the same help when we need it. Like you can't, no man is an island, right? I mean, nobody, the worst punishment you could get at a certain point in history was to be, banished from your tribe or from your town or from whatever, because you couldn't survive. You
Yeah.
can't just live without other people. You need, whether whether or not they annoy you or whether or not you choose to. Like it is a fact that we as a species, like, need to rely on each other to survive.
Well,
And
I mean, I challenge
so
the assumption that it's all about how much we can gather for ourselves too. Because what happens anytime we see somebody that's in need, or see somebody that's in trouble or struggling with something, and it just happens to be something that we're really good at. We are quick to jump all over that with all of our solutions and work on it until it's fixed, because it's something we know how to do. I think that speaks to
right.
something a bit deeper about us.
Well, why even specialize, why produce more than you personally can use if it's not to benefit everyone around you, right? Whether it's your family, whether it's your local community, your church group, like whoever, like it's got to be more than just you. Because if you're producing for no reason, then it's almost like a mental illness, right? I mean, it would be like a compulsive disorder, right? You're hoarding, you're gathering for what purpose?
Yeah.
If it's not to enrich your life beyond, if you can only enrich your life so much, right? I mean, this is my argument against multi-billionaires. Like, there's only so much you can do with the amount of money you gather, right? And like for most normal people, like there is a ebb and flow. Sometimes you have good periods where you're making a lot of money, and hopefully you're smart enough to put some away or invest wisely. And then there's other times where maybe it's not as, productive or whatever. And that's just sort of how life goes. But, it feels grotesque to me to just continue to just like impulsively hoard and gather, and like it's never enough. I'm never wealthy enough. I never have enough. I don't have enough things. I don't have like that seems more like a mental illness than normal behavior, or behavior anyone else should be emulating. But
Normal human behavior on a human scale,
yeah,
thinking on a human scale.
right,
I think
right,
I think a lot of people. I think what happens is people are thinking on, or they believe that they are thinking on a higher scale. They're thinking in terms of legacy. I'm passing this down, or I'm gathering for something that's going to be beyond me or something like that. That's the justification they give for their gluttony or whatnot. That
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking about the world beyond myself, or a timeline beyond my time here on Earth. And come on, man. Well, anyway, that once again we got caught up, and that's
Always end on a light note.
Oh man, yeah. Go ahead and chew on that until you choke.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, drop us a line. Let us know what you think about all these things. Show at linuxotc.org. Hit us up on. We're on Discord a lot. We got a Discord. Go to the website linuxotc.org. There's links on there to what few socials we have. I think we just have email, Discord, and Mastodon. But we're pretty good at answering all of those. So let us know what you think. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I'm Bill.
And I'm Eric.
Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks, everybody, live stream. Those of you that are in the United States, go ahead and build your igloos and get strapped in. Apparently, the end of the world is coming tomorrow.
Are you getting any of that?
A little bit of the snow, and then
Okay.
it's like most of these things. It's going to be anywhere from 2 inches to 875 feet. One of them things. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, somewhere in between, right?
Yeah. Well, I was down in Mississippi earlier in the week, and they were calling for several inches of ice. So that's not good.
Mm.